It's confession time, and if your confession is used, you get a smart speaker. Today's goes to Grabber. Thanks, Grabber. Here's today's confession. Father Simon, names and locations have been changed to avoid, even to this day, severe embarrassment to the protagonists and the innocents involved. Back in the early 80s, a fledgling IT company based northwest of London, you're going to like these guys,
Okay.
had assembled a group of young, talented professionals, approximately 40 of us. As you may imagine, the mixture of youth and hormones led to several relationships being formed. Many didn't survive, but statistically speaking, it was inevitable that one would thrive and develop into something special. Staff were roughly split 60-40 in favour of men. Naturally, most of these men supported various football teams. Amongst them, the most popular, Tottenham, Leeds, Aston Villa and Liverpool. Oh. Now, back in the day, most games were played on a Saturday. So as you may expect, Monday morning in the office, the first hour was devoted to developing software, no, but to talking about the results of the weekend, yes. Long enough for all of us to except for one member of staff who had dedication to his beloved team like I have never seen before or since. I mentioned that something special happened in a relationship. Well, the happy couple, let's call them Mark and Victoria, announced their engagement and announced their wedding date several months in the future. Mark's team was the mighty Liverpool, and he was an avid news collector for everything concerning Liverpool FC. Now, back in the early 90s, before the internet was prevalent, one way of finding out the latest news was by phone, and you could call a premium rate number to access a pre-recorded service giving you a daily update on your favourite football team. Mark was probably the most passionate football supporter I've ever met. Every morning without fail, he would get into work early, mainly to avoid management, and he would phone the very expensive premium rate number on the office phone to get the updated news and be ready when everyone else arrived at work to report back to the office how his team were doing, training, injuries, potential transfers, fixtures, and that kind of thing. He'd then insist on regaling the news to everyone who passed by his desk to say good morning. By 10 o'clock, he must have told the same news to at least 10 people. His fiancée, Victoria, was a saint, and she put up with his obsession without complaint. She didn't have any real interest in football, and every time Mark raised the subject, you could see her roll her eyes in exasperation, which must have happened 30 or 40 times a day.
Wow.
How about that? Okay, as time ticked by, he got closer to the wedding day. Naturally, the office and their colleagues had a collection for some lovely gifts. However, none so lovely as a football with autographs from all the top Liverpool players at the time. Can you imagine? Bruce Grobbelaar, John Barnes, Ian Rush and Graham Souness and many others all adorned this particular football. Autographs which any football supporter would love to have, let alone one who was so passionate about Liverpool FC. As the nominated time on the last day before they went off to get married, all the staff gathered together to wish them well and pass the gifts across. All of a sudden, from behind the crowd of colleagues, a shout went up, "Here, Mark, catch!" And the football was thrown towards him. On catching the football, Mark was amazed to see the autographs. He actually got a tear in his eye, and he called out, "Ian, Bruce, John, Graham," as in Souness.
Yeah.
"Wow, this is fantastic. I can't believe it." The other gifts remained untouched for several minutes until Victoria managed to get Mark's attention away from the football. So both Mark and Victoria got happily married and went on to have children whom I no doubt have been indoctrinated and all avid football fans and support Liverpool. Over time, all the colleagues slowly dispersed to follow career paths and enjoy happy lives, never knowing the truth. Many weeks later, Mark and Victoria brought the wedding photos into the office for everyone to see. The first one was bride and groom's left arm around her waist, and in the right hand, a football. The bridesmaids and a football, friends of the bride with a football, friends of the groom with a football. The football made it into all the photos, and instead of Mark looking lovingly into Victoria's eyes, he was looking lovingly towards a football. So now is a good time to say what you might have guessed, but Mark didn't, indeed still hasn't. So Mark, here's the thing. Your beloved Liverpool ball is a fake.
Oh, dear.
A gang from the office had gone into the town to a sports shop and bought a £1.99 football. Sat in the car, they got out several marker pens and started scribbling names of the team on the football. The autographs must have been barely dry when they threw the ball to Mark during the presentation. They never intended the prank to go quite so far. In fact, they'd intended to own up. But anyway, hey, they didn't. Anyway, so that's the way it goes. I beg forgiveness by proxy for Mark for running running up the extortionate phone bills, duping Mark and Victoria into believing the football was authentic, counterfeiting the Liverpool autographs, which is probably illegal, causing Mark and Victoria to fill their wedding day photos with a football, and any embarrassment which may be caused to Mark and Victoria because they hadn't found out the truth. Until now, that's the shocking thing. Grabber writes, it's a shocking story about Liverpool FC. And as soon as an autograph turns up in a confession, it's a fake. That's just like a standard rule. Sister Susie from the pub.
I don't think I forgive anyone in this. I don't forgive Mark for taking the football with him to his wedding. Who needs that? I don't care how much you love your football team. You don't need a signed football at your wedding. And then I also think if he loved the football team that much, that was just mean. Just mean, giving him a fake. No. I don't care. I'm sorry, not forgiven.
Brother Matthew in the red top.
So who misses out in this story? Everyone's a winner, really. I mean, everyone in the office did okay out of it. And, Mark thinks he's got the ball. Until now, he's just found out that it's a complete dud. I mean, obviously, Victoria can't have been too happy about all of her wedding pictures now include a man holding a ball that is just scribbled on by people they used to work with. And it is also worth saying that the early 90s Liverpool team was a pretty fallow time for Liverpool at that time. So, no great stars, I think. I'm going to say forgiven, just because, everyone wins.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a shock. Matt forgives. Who'd have known? So it's the people's verdict, please. It's entirely down to you. It's the people's verdict. Do you forgive Grabber, yes or no? On the text 61054, you start your message with Simon. 61054 on the text. The people's verdict. Do you forgive, yes or no? However, just before 6, we were in confession land, and Grabber sent in a torrid tale which revolved around a fake series of autographs on a football with a whole bunch of people who were pretending to be from Liverpool FC in the early 90s. Whether they were not one of the exceptional teams or not is not the point.
No, it's
Matt
not.
Williams.
No.
Anyway, and it ended up with Mark and Victoria having a very happy wedding day with a football in all the photographs. Let me see what the people's verdict is. Here it is.
Yes, this tends to come down to whether you like Liverpool Football Club. Nick in Horsham in West Sussex. Forgiven. I hate football. I'm a rugger man through and through. Forgiven. After all, he was only a Liverpool fan, says Blue Nose Dino. Not forgiving this guy. He could have left the ball at home, and just supporting Liverpool is a sin in itself. Even my husband didn't talk about football on our wedding, which is a miracle. Saintly Man City fan. And finally, Robin says, not a chance. Grabber should be strung up for his prank. And Matt, shut up, you tart. Lovely. Great. Thanks for that.
Is that from
Robin?
your wife?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that. Your confession, if it gets read out, you get a smart speaker. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. I would like to know what percentage of our audience is in a hot tub, basically. It seems to be an awful lot. And currently on hold, says Sue, currently 36 minutes and counting.
Oh, dear.
Wow.
Well, it's confession time. Thank you very much indeed. I suppose PG. Mm-hmm. Because let me tell you, today's confession comes from an anonymous spiritual care and bereavement support lead at a hospice somewhere in the northwest of England, who I'm going to call, just for the benefit of this, I'm going to call Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
So Mr. Fisher, the anonymous spiritual care and bereavement support lead at a hospice somewhere in the northwest of England, which kind of gives you a feel for where we are with today's confession. So, the team, I was prompted, says Mr. Fisher, to write to you after listening to the wrong funeral confession. It happens to, I do think one funeral confession tends to lead to another one. In my current role, working in a hospice, I do end up taking a lot of funerals. In fact, funeral planning is one of my jobs. And consequently, after helping with the planning of a funeral, I'm often asked to take the funeral as the celebrant. This was the case with one individual who was heavily into their music but couldn't decide which songs to use. I helped him put his own service together, and then, sure enough, after he'd sadly died, I was asked to take his funeral. This is the world in which I operate, says Mr. Fisher. This was a busy time of year, so I'd done a similar task for another inpatient and had agreed to do their funeral as well. So unusually I had 2 funerals in 1 week. Just the sort of challenge that helps concentrate the mind of the celebrant in order to make sure you have the correct notes in front of you and are at the right place for the right person at the right time. All additional stresses when you want everything to go smoothly and with dignity. Any celebrant who takes lots of funerals in different crematoriums will tell you that one of the little-known additional stresses is checking out what system each place uses when signalling to the little unseen booth at the back. This is about when you want the next track played and which button it is for the curtains to be drawn, if that's what you actually want. In my funeral-heavy week of 2 funerals, I was at 2 different crematoriums, each one with a different button signalling system.
Wow.
But the art of using these behind the lectern buttons is for no one to see you slide your hand gently, placing your finger on the right button, hidden from those attending, and to effortlessly help everything to fall into place as expected. All went as planned at funeral number 1. The buttons were pressed, the curtains were drawn, dignity was kept at all times. Arriving the second crematorium for the second funeral, I got there early, asked to be taken to the lectern and to have a quick briefing as to which button does what. All good so far. As a celebrant, there are many thoughts flying around your head just before a funeral begins, making sure everything is okay, giving a sense of assured calm, professionalism, and maintaining the correct funeral face, and many more besides. Anyway, funeral number 2 then seemed to be going well, as these things can. People spoke who wanted to speak, music played at all the right moments. I was doing a sterling job, feeling my way towards the hidden button and pressing it at all the right moments. Finally, the service was over, and the last piece of music played. I paused before leaving the sanctuary first. As I did so, one of the undertakers shuffled up to me. I thought it was rather close, but anyway, muttered in hushed whisper, "Did you know that every time when you pressed the button for a piece of music, you were in fact pressing the button to close the curtains around the coffin?"
Oh, no.
So, utter horror overcame me as I pictured the scene for the upset mourners. Each time I'd press the wrong button, the curtains would jerk into life and happily begin their task of drawing themselves around the deceased. In the secret hidden booth, panic set in as the sweating technical staff realised this and overrode my mad episode of button sabotage each time by sending the curtains swishing back into their fully open position and putting on a correct piece of music each time. This happened 4 times.
Oh, fabulous.
Feeling absolutely dreadful, I immediately sought out the deceased's wife and apologised profusely about my trigger-happy curtain escapades. As I told her she was surrounded by her 3 children, very generously she replied to my apologies that it didn't matter and that no one noticed. Although at that point, the angelic little girl standing next to her looked up and said, "Well, I did."
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, child. Children. Don't you love them? I would like to ask forgiveness to the family once more and to the stressed out and sweaty backroom staff who realised my terrible mistake and corrected it each time. I hope the collective will find it in their hearts to offer forgiveness, having now heard my very sorry tale. Yours, the anonymous spiritual care and bereavement support lead at hospice somewhere in the northwest of England, who we are calling Mr. Fisher. So Mr. Fisher would like some forgiveness. I mean, I think Mr. Fisher was trying to do the right thing. It's clearly difficult to get it right when you're working in different crems around the parish. Anyway, let's see what Sister Susie from the pub is making of this one.
Well, Mr. Fisher, I think we've all been there, haven't we? We've all pressed the wrong button.
Oh, I see. Press the wrong button, yes, every day.
Oh, we've all done that. Yeah.
We've all done that. Just unfortunately, the buttons that they pressed in the circumstances weren't great. But I did quite like about the button briefing. Did know that happened at a creme just before they did that. That was nice. And I just think, you know, we all need a laugh at a funeral, isn't it? And, you know, maybe it wasn't the perfect moment, but it put a smile on their face. Children always tell you the truth as well. That's very, very true. But there's nothing really to forgive. I think you tried your best. It didn't work out, but it wasn't the worst that happened, so I forgive.
One up for Mr. Fisher. Let's check in with Brother Matthew.
We've all learned today, haven't we, about the button? Because I didn't know anything about this button thing either. So that's really taken us. And were they facing the final curtain? Turns out not. Turns out there's at least 3 more final curtains still to come.
Be a lesson to you.
There you go. He was clearly doing his best, wasn't he? It's definitely forgiven.
It's not over until at least the fourth curtain.
You've got the fourth curtain to come.
Okay, so it's the people's verdict. That's what we need. Do you forgive Mr. Fisher? Yes or no on the text. It's 61054. Start your message with Simon. The people's verdict is on the way via the text. 61054. The first word is Simon. Your confession would be very welcome. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's 10 minutes past 6, and tonight's confession came from Mr. Fisher about the second funeral that Mr. Fisher went to. Where he was in charge of. He pressed the wrong buttons, which meant that instead of cueing the next piece of music, he actually fired the curtains, which closed around the coffin. And it was up to the crazy tech staff in the booth to try and correct Mr. Fisher's mistakes with hilarious consequences. Here's the people's verdict. What do they make of what Mr. Fisher got up to?
So, Caroline McHugh in Berwickshire says, Mr. Fisher, absolutely forgiven. I was laughing so much I nearly dropped the iron. Trigger happy but forgiven, says Greg. Chloe says, absolutely not forgiven. Everyone knows about the button. Yes, there were 2 funerals, but he only had 1 job. Press the button. Not forgiven. Which feels harsh. Tom from Swindon says, forgiven. Obviously, the deceased thought they'd had led a good life and deserved an encore, or 3. And finally, Jeremy says, I forgive. These things happen. At my father's funeral, the parson's microphone slowly dropped into the Bible, causing feedback. My older brother thought it was part of the show.
Show?
It's part of the show.
It's a show.
Yeah.
All right, that's what it is. Okay, thank you very much indeed for those. Your confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Which,
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Pad thai.
Tasty.
Yeah.
it's got prawns.
Yeah, well, I'll have them.
Okay, you can have my prawns.
Okay.
Anyway, so the food is on the way. It's confession time. Just a reminder that if you're tempted to send in your confession, you're not quite sure whether to put the effort in, there is a smart speaker in it for you. If you send it in and if we use it, you get the smart speaker. You send it to confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It will be legal. It will not involve a laxative. That's the rule. It's definitely the rule. If there's a laxative involved, it's not getting in.
We'll enjoy it in the office, but it doesn't get on.
I'd say no toilety things, please.
Well, let's not be too prescriptive.
Come on.
Anyway, they're the rules so far. Anyway, confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Today's comes from Kaza. Father Simon, Brother Matthew, Sister Susie from the pub. My confession goes back to 1986. When I was 11 years old, I attended a Catholic junior school in East Yorkshire. My best friend, let's call her Shakira, and I were the only non-Catholics in our year. We were often looked upon by our classmates as outsiders as a result. Shakira and I were pretty mischievous, but when teachers were around, we cultivated a goody two-shoes image, much to the annoyance of our friends, who often grassed us up for the slightest misdemeanor. We even became prefects despite not being in the top set for maths and English, as she was there, and Helen, the head girl, would often remind us of this fact. Well,
Is that a prerequisite for being a prefect? Is you've got to be really good at stuff?
I don't think that's fair.
I was a prefect.
Oh, were you?
I'm not at all surprised.
No.
But were you in the top sets for everything?
No.
There you go. Okay,
There you go.
well, Kaz has got this completely the wrong way around. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be quite a few prefects, head girl, head boy style confessions after this. Anyway, Kaz says one of our duties was to look after the school library, which gave us access to the school before the bell rang each day. We would check in each morning before class to ensure all the books were neatly in place and that it was in a presentable state. Important work. One cold, wet, miserable January morning, we entered the library to find that books had been thrown all over the place. Not just any books, but Bibles. All the Bibles had been thrown around with their dust jackets missing, scattered over tables, the floor. Also, bizarrely, 40 copies of The Secret Garden, strewn across the library.
Wow.
I think they were studying it in English. And it was, frankly, a chaotic and disturbing scene. We informed the RE teacher, who, having taken a look for herself, instructed us immediately to clean and tidy the place and said that they would inform Mrs. Krusty, our PE teacher, that we... Who'd have thought?
That's an excellent name.
Okay, we didn't change that name, did we?
No.
Oh,
That we
superb.
wouldn't be attending her first class of the day as we had an important job to do.
Mrs. Krusty, the PE teacher. Brilliant.
Always.
Already forgiven. Yeah, go on.
Clearing up the Bibles and the secret gardens was holy work that simply couldn't wait. What outrage had been committed in the library? Was there demonic activity involved? Did we need an exorcist? Well, the school was baffled. Teachers were baffled. The bishop was concerned. Well, we got to work and we found that the job didn't take that much time after all. All the missing dust jackets were easily located. Books were promptly placed on the correct shelves and chairs neatly placed under the tables once more. Shakira and I gave each other a knowing glance. You see, Father Simon, the books and chairs hadn't been thrown about at all. No devils had been let loose in our school, apart from the new Year 2 intake. They were a bit,
Yeah.
bit of a nightmare. That's her and me, had carefully placed each book, chair and dust jacket to simply make it look as though everything had been thrown around. Because, here's the thing, we hated PE. Everyone without exception hates PE. And we wanted to do everything we could to aid Mrs. Krusty that wet, miserable January morning as we continued congratulating ourselves on dodging PE. Something caught our eye. Couldn't quite believe it. It was our beloved classmates trudging past the library window as the music becomes very, very powerful. And they were soaking wet, all of them, covered in mud and on the first lap of a surprise cross-country run.
Oh, there's a surprise.
Oh, wow.
Everybody hates cross-country runs. Their Simon Le Bon-inspired spiky fringes were ruined by the watery deluge from the sky and the freezing temperatures. Shakira and I did what any self-respecting 11-year-olds would do. We grabbed a Cherry-Aid Panda Pop and a packet of pickled onion-flavoured crisps and sat on the radiators by the window, watching in absolute hysterics as our class 4B waddled and hobbled past, not reacting particularly well to our waves and cheers as they embarked on the second lap. Father Simon, I asked not for forgiveness from the teachers who we deceived, nor from our classmates who probably enjoyed being so miserable, nor from the books, as none were harmed in the great PE evading plot of 1986. As I keep telling you, everybody hates PE. Now, I seek forgiveness from the person who saw fit to leave a packet of pickled onion-flavoured crisps in the library the previous day, never to see them again. In fact, this is an act of theft. We shouldn't have included this confession. Yeah. Anyway, they were the perfect accompaniment to our front row viewing, and I maintain a love of those crisps to this day. Yours in hopes of absolution, because it wasn't the devil or any of his kind, it was us, Kazza and Shakira. And Kazza is the writer of tonight's confession about the Devil's Library. Let's check in, though. Apart from the kind of slight theft at the end, Sister Susie from the pub.
Yeah, well, I feel for you, Kazza, because I also didn't like PE and hated it. Also, no one enjoys cross-country.
That's true.
However, you were a prefect, so you should have led by example, and that is not the actions of a prefect, I'm afraid. Also, pickled onion crisps.
Yes.
They're very tasty. We have them in the pub as one of the bar snacks. And you should never, ever, ever take anyone's pickled onion crisps. Not allowed. Not forgiven from me. Thank you very much.
Okay. It'd be interesting to hear from prefects and head boys and head girls as to what they have to say. Brother Matthew, what do you say on this particular one?
Kazza clearly sneaking in a theft right at the end there. But I was very much in her corner. And, I mean, it's so easy to sit here and criticise PE teachers, which is why I do it. Cross-country runs, come on. We all know what you're doing. You're doing your marking. You've got to catch up on you didn't do your marking last night. So what am I going to do? I'm going to send them off on a cross-country run. See you in an hour, Mrs. Krusty. I am definitely going to forgive. The Bibles everywhere seem like the opening scene in a horror movie.
Yes. But it wasn't the devil. It was, as ever, Kazza and Shakira.
Definitely.
So it's the people's verdict, please. That's what we need. On the text, please. Guilty or no, 61054. Start your message with Simon. The People's Verdict, please, on tonight's confession. People's Verdict is in. What do they say?
So Helen Battersby says, definitely forgiven. Used to hate cross-country. School was nowhere near any country, so would have done exactly the same. Chev says, defo forgiven. We used to write weird plays in the girls' toilets because didn't want fresh air at break time. I'm going to say not forgiven, says Deb the Demon Dimmer. We loved cross-country at our school. It meant an hour free on the streets instead of in class. It was the 80s.
Really?
Vicky says, I would totally forgive. I didn't even hear the whole story as a call came through in the middle, much to my annoyance. Just to hear the familiar crowd together again is enough to make me forgive anyone. Welcome back. And finally, the Cannon family say, a verdict from 2 former prefects, a PE teacher and a 15-year-old who hates cross-country and pickled onion crisps. Not forgiven. Absolutely ridiculous. Who would even do that?
Your confession, please. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.